Hi y'all, welcome back to the channel. Rona and I are here building batteries, and today's video is the one I promised you, where I'm going to show you how I assembled the Apex DIY box that I introduced you to in the last video. And I've gotten it mostly assembled. I didn't want this to be a 2-hour video, and this project by the time I'm done, it will have taken about 2 hours to assemble this box. I'm getting around a little bit better. I can now stand without crutches and walk without crutches. I'm getting there. I'm going to get this boot off next week, and then I'll be in an ankle brace for a few weeks, and then I can be back to normal. Oh my God, I can't wait. I feel like I'm so cooped up, but I have gotten a bunch of batteries built, and so this battery box that I'm building is the one that Jenny Wu sent me from Docan Technologies, and she sent me all these 280 amp hour cells, and I'm putting it together to figure out for her what might need to be modified, what I would do different, and if it's a battery box that I would use in my system. So far, so good. There are some things that I'm doing different and making recommendations to them, which I think they're going to modify, or have the manufacturer modify the ones that they sell to be more along the lines of what I'm doing here. There are a few things that are that I would do different. So let's get into it and see what those are, and importantly, what kind of instructions come with this. I was a little bit apprehensive about instructions that seem to be mostly pictures. A few words, but mostly pictures. But they've done a really good job. They have these little zoomed in areas that show exactly what they're trying to indicate. So, they're trying to indicate taking these off, and they show it by removing those screws. Those are the braces. And then we take the braces off, and we have bags of hardware inside. And the bags of hardware are numbered. There are 6 bags, and you use them in order. And the first one has these separators, these hard plastic separators. They're similar to the little cutting boards that I cut apart to keep my cells isolated from one another. And they line the metal box with these. Now, I did not remember, I thought that there was a concern, I had a concern that the back of this box right here was just going to be a bar and not be supported. But in my memory, I checked that and it was a solid plate, and I don't know what's wrong with my memory. Some people commented in the comment section of the introduction video that that was a case and was a problem. And I remembered checking it out. In my brain, I remembered checking it out and it wasn't. But then when I went back and looked, it actually does not have a solid plate there like I remembered seeing. So, is that a problem? Well, probably not, actually. I went ahead and took a couple of pieces of aluminum and cut to size and put in there to give a solid backing. But is it really a problem? I actually don't think that it is, because the reason that I want to hold these cells together so that they don't move, it's not so much that I don't want them to expand in order to give them a longer cycle life. I'm more concerned with the movement that can occur with these bus bars if they're allowed to expand over time, that it's going to put more and more pressure on these terminals, and I don't want that. So that's why I have restrained the batteries in my box I can't lift this up to show you, but you've seen it. Hopefully you've been on the channel long enough to see what these look like. And that's why I put a little bit of pressure on these. Yes, it approaches the pressure that they've talked about with the manufacturer putting compression on these cells, but I don't go to all that trouble of, you know, that you see online of spring tension and all this. All I want to do, I'm not trying to squeeze these batteries. I'm just trying to give them a warm hug from your mom, just to hold them in place so that they don't move and grow over time, because I think that they can have a ratcheting effect. And we've seen on other YouTube channels and on discussion forums where if you don't restrain them over several cycles, they start to grow. And I really don't want that, because once that happens, you're not going to get it back. And if you do, I've seen some problems occur where people tried to recompress these cells, and that is not good, because you don't want to crush that architecture inside that cell. You want to hold it and not let it grow, but you don't want to recompress it if it does expand. So here is the bus bar that they send. It's an aluminum bus bar. These are the bus bars that you get with the cells. They're 2 millimeters by 10 millimeters. These are larger. Rona, come here, girl. Come here, girl. Get out of there. So they have to be larger because aluminum does not have the current carrying capacity that copper does. I have measured these with my milliohm tester, and they have the same amount of resistance, but this is how much larger aluminum has to be in order to have the same resistance as copper of this dimension. Now, there's a couple of problems with aluminum. One is it has a lot more thermal expansion. The coefficient of expansion, COE, the thermal coefficient of expansion of aluminum is much greater than copper. And so when these heat up, because you're running a lot of current through them, when they heat up, they're going to expand more than copper would. Is it enough to over time loosen up those terminals? Well, you know, we've had that problem in the past with electrical wire, electrical terminals that use aluminum, and you actually have to go back and tighten them up over time, because they'll loosen up in your electrical panel. So I don't want to use aluminum bus bars, even though I have aluminum terminals on the batteries. Before I go any further, how do you purchase this? Well, you purchase it the same way that you would purchase cells from Jenny Wu. You just send her an email to jennywoo896@gmail.com. And if you mention my channel when you do so, I'll get a little commission off of it, but you're not obligated to do that. There's not a link you're going to click on where she automatically tallies, where I don't have affiliate links. But she will give me credit for it. And that's how much I trust Jenny Wu. She wouldn't have to, but she does. And if you want me to get credit, mention my channel when you purchase this box, if you decide you want to, or when you purchase these cells from Jenny Wu, if you decide you want to. And if you just want a reputable salesperson who's going to treat you right and communicate with you well and work hard on your behalf, then just talk to Jenny Wu at her email address, and don't mention my channel. It's fine with me. Either way, the price you pay is going to be the same. There's no discount, but then I get a cut, and it's all in it. There's none of that gamesmanship that happens so often. So that's how you get it. Now, let's go back to building this up. One of the other reasons that I use the copper bus bar is because I can tap a thread in this copper that will hold a 4mm screw. And I'm going to do that with a tricky little device that I get from Amazon that is a combination drill bit and tap. See how that is? And that's a 4mm tap. I don't trust doing that on an aluminum bus bar. If I tap threads into this aluminum bus bar, I think that they will tear out of aluminum. I have had threaded aluminum tear out the threads many times in the past. And this is fairly thin, so you're only going to get a couple of threads, and I think that that's not a good thing to tap. And I want to have the sensing wire threaded onto a separate part of the bus bar, because in the instructions for this battery and for this kit, and many others, batteries have been built this way. The serrated nuts, they have these teeth on them, and they will bite into the bus bar so that it doesn't loosen back up. If you put a ring terminal or a washer in between the serrated nut and the bus bar, then that serration will tighten up onto the ring terminal, but not onto the bus bar, and the whole thing can turn and loosen up over time and over the hundreds and thousands of heat cycles that this connection is going to see. So in order for this connection to feel to me like it's a permanent, forever connection, I want that serration to be biting into the bus bar, and I want my sensing wire to be over here in a separate location. If I've already said that, I'm sorry. Those are the reasons that I want to use a copper bus bar and not an aluminum bus bar. I have one of my favorite YouTube channels. The guy used aluminum bus bars, and he ended up with a lot of heat issues, and he ended up going back to copper bus bars on his builds. Now, the next instruction is going to show how these batteries are arranged in the box so that you end up with them organized correctly for the assembly of the bus bars. And then it shows you've got these foam, and you get a little extra of each of the parts. You got this foam rubber pad that's got an adhesive on the back of it, and it's going to get mounted to the battery before you assemble. And on 8 of them, you're going to put it on the face that's facing towards you when the positive terminal is to your right, and on the other 8, you're going to put it on the face that's facing towards you when the negative terminal is to your right. And then when you install them into the box, you're going to install them with the foam rubber back against the back of the box, and the plastic wrap is going to be towards you, because when you get to the end, you're going to install one more piece of foam rubber and one more piece of the hard plastic isolator to keep everything separated from the metal frame of the box. And then you're going to put this pressure plate on, this end plate on, and it's held on with 7 bolts. And those bolts look like this. And when I put these together, these cells were really flat. The cells I got from Jenny Wu were really flat, and they all put together with all these different layers to where there was a 3/8 of an inch or 10 millimeter gap between that metal frame and this end plate, which means that about this much of the bolt was showing, and this much of the bolt was buried off into the threads of the nut that's holding it, the frame that's holding it. So if you were to buy cells that had a little bit of a puffiness to them, a little bloating to them, you could get away with that and still get this to connect, catch that first thread and start tightening down. One of my favorite YouTubers built a box that was similar to this that was sold by Seplos, made in the same factory. It's pretty obvious it was made in the same factory. And his cells had a little bit of bloating to them, or a lot. I think he got a deal on those cells. And when he tried to put that pressure plate on, as I recall, he had to push really hard on it to get that first thread to catch. I don't recall if he tightened it up all the way until the metal frames touched, but in my case, I was able to go ahead and get those to tighten up until they touched and put some tension on them, some torque on them. Now, I didn't tighten this this bolt all the way up and then go to the next one. I put a couple of turns on this one, couple of turns on this one, and I went all the way through, a little at a time, a couple of turns on each one, and I kept going around and around until I had the whole thing tightened up, so I didn't put a lot of pressure on one place at a time. And I felt really good about how that worked out. I feel like these cells are held very nicely. I like it at least as well as the system that I have on mine, maybe more. I like mine for a lot of reasons, but that aspect is really good. And then the next thing that happens is we go to the battery link, and that battery link is going to mount on top of those crossbars, those braces that we pulled off in the first step to get the parts out of the box. And this battery link, bag number 2, is going to have the 2 circuit boards that have all the sensing wires coming off of them and the connector for the BMS cable. And then it has 2 foam rubber gaskets that get mounted onto, well, in this instruction, the next thing you do is you put the bus bars on, but you don't tighten them down. And then it shows putting a washer. You know I'm not going to want to do that because I want those serrated nuts to bite into it. And then you peel the backing off this foam rubber gasket and you attach it to this brace and then mount that into the box. And it shows in the zoomed in spot where you tighten up these. And when you do that, the height of these cells, either the 280 or 304 amp hour cells, is going to put that foam rubber gasket in contact with the top of your cells to help hold them in place. And so they're firmly held in place when you get done. And then the next step is to come in with 6 screws and attach these circuit boards down to the top of those braces. And there's holes in them that stack right above the release vents of the battery cells. And then the next thing we're going to do, we're not going to put the ring terminal on top of a washer and then put the nut, because I want that nut to hold firmly onto the bus bar. Now, let me tell you, if you buy this kit and you want to put it together exactly like they're showing, just check your terminal tightness after you've cycled it a dozen times and make sure everything's still tight. And then check it again 100 cycles later and make sure everything's still tight. And then check it once a year and make sure everything's still tight. That's my recommendation. Many, many batteries, more than not, have been built with the ring terminal in between the serrated nut and the bus bar. I'm telling you what I would do. That's what I promised you. I promised you I would tell you what I would do. And this is what I would do. I would use a tapped hole in the bus bar. And some of these batteries are being built that way now. And I have every confidence that if you buy this kit in the future, that they will make the change. I brought this to the attention of the company, and they seemed really open to the idea of changing this out to be copper bus bars with the threads already cut into them. But for me, for now, I went ahead and used the bus bars that came with the cells, or with some cells, because the bus bars that came with these cells had the insulated wrap on them. If you want to do what I'm doing, you're going to have to remove some of that insulated wrap so that you can get to the top of the bus bar to tie the sensing wire into a threaded hole. But if you want to buy this kit and build it just according to the instructions, do I think you'll have a problem? Probably not. But I just want to make sure that I build it the best way I know how. So, in my case, when I got to this point, my bus bars were already tightened down with the serrated nuts, and then I put the sensing wires onto the threaded holes in the bus bars. Now, if you look right here, you see a separate thing, and what that is the temperature sensor. There's one there, there's one here, and then there's two more down here. And in this kit, they show those sensing wires for the temperature sensors being attached to the top of the bus bar underneath the nut. I really am going to recommend that you not do that. What I've done here is I've done that on two of them. And what that's going to do is it's going to register the temperature of that bus bar. And if you're running significant current through that bus bar, we know it's going to be warmer than the cells below. And what we want this temperature sensor to do is tell us what the temperature of the cells is, because we don't want to charge these cells if the temperature is below 0°C or 32 Fahrenheit. Well, so I took two of these sensors and I didn't attach them. I just laid them in there to where they're in the air. Okay? And I have two of them that are attached to the bus bar. And when I get ready to use this battery, I'm going to look at those four temperatures. You can look at the readout on the display and you can see what those temperature sensors are measuring. And I'm going to be able to see two of them that are attached to the bus bars and two of them that are not. But the two that are not, if this battery is never going to be in freezing temperatures, but if this battery were to be in freezing temperatures, it would know. It wouldn't get confused just because it's got current running through it. It wouldn't be confused about the temperature of the cells and allow you to potentially charge the cell when the cell is below 0°C. I think that's the last thing that I did different than the instructions. Well, other than the fact that I prepped my terminals, cleaned my terminals, and then I used this MG847 carbon conductive paste. This is a insulator for a multimeter probe that I don't use, and it just happened to fit a brass plumbing fitting that had the right size hole in it. And goodness gracious, this works so well. Let me show you. Put a little bit of that paste on this foam, and then you can come, it'll slide right, that hole will slide right over the stud and puts that paste on there real cleanly. And that paste is a mess. It helps keep it off of my fingers. I'm still going to get it on my fingers, but not like when I was trying to hold that little fitting myself. Whew, that was always a mess, and it gets all over everything. But I like using it. All right. After that, your battery is done. Now you're going to start assembling the front plate. And the front plate, it has all the parts on it. It mounts the BMS, the terminals, the fuse, and the display. And so, let's walk through that right quick. We're going to mount the fuse holder, and we're going to mount the terminals. And these instructions were very clear, made it really easy. And then it's got this isolator that gets mounted onto that plate, and it gets mounted onto the plate right in this area where well, we'll get to it when we get to it. But first, they have us installing this connector, which is going to be important for tying the terminals together. We install the display with 4 screws, and then we install this, I think it's like butyl. It feels like butyl tape, and it goes right in the area of the BMS where the heat sink is on the back side of the BMS. And then the next step is to install the BMS itself. Now, I had a little concern about that because it installs the BMS on 6 posts, and then we're going to come and we're going to connect wires to the BMS in these areas here and here. And when we do, we're going to use a screwdriver, and I want those screws to be very tight. Okay, here's the flexible copper conductors that are going to tie all this together. And when we install those onto the BMS, I want to just follow the instructions here. This ties the fuse to the positive terminals. This ties the then you're going to tie the 3 terminals that come off of the BMS. You're going to tie them on and then tie it to the other side of the fuse terminal. Now, when you're tightening up these screws right here, that circuit board is floating because it's held by a pedestal, by a screw on a pedestal here and here. So put some gloves on, reach in underneath that terminal and give it a little bit of support as you tighten up from underneath. Let's just show you on the real deal. I'm not going to touch that circuit board with bare fingers, but reach up underneath there and support that circuit board with some gloved hands when you tighten that screw down, because you want that to be really tight. And I went ahead and used the carbon conductive paste on each of those terminals, and I did the same thing here, and I did the same thing here. Put carbon conductive paste and then reach up underneath and support it as you tighten this down as tight as you can tighten it with a Phillips screwdriver, because you don't want that loosening up. This is the negative, all the negative juice running through this battery runs through this shunt. You don't want that loosen up because you don't want to cause arcing and cause your battery to shut down. So the instructions will show you how to get it all assembled. And they were very easy to follow. And then you've got it to this point, and then the next thing it does, it's going to show you how to take the cabling and attach the display cable from where it ties into the back of the BMS and into the display. And then you're going to tie the BMS cables into the back of the BMS. And these cables don't run to the terminals themselves, they run to that circuit board that has all the sensing wires on it. There's a long one and a short one. The black terminal one is short and the white terminal is long, and that's important later. Now we are to the point in the instructions where I am at. And so we're going to continue the build now on camera. So I've got my screws. Let me just put them out here where I can reach them. I've got my screwdriver. And now I'm going to put it in. Now let's see if I can start these screws. I need 3 hands, or I need to be really coordinated, and I don't think I have either of those. Oh look, I was coordinated. Well, I don't have 3 hands, but I still have a little bit of manual dexterity. Let's get this one lined up. Once I get those 2 started, oh, now I'm in good shape. Now we'll go ahead and put the screws in. There are 10 screws that hold this front plate on. I'm going to go ahead and get them all started. I'm not going to tighten any of them up until I get them all started, because every once in a while you'll end up having to fight with the last one if you have it already tightened up elsewhere. And if you leave it a little loose, then you can get it to jiggle around and get them all started. So that's always a good idea. When you order this box, you have to order the cables separately. And you're going to want to go ahead and do that because these connectors are kind of special. They lock on, the cables lock onto these terminals, and you can buy the terminals and make your own cables, or you can buy cables made up already that will lock onto here. But I did not order cables or connectors when I bought this box, and unfortunately I cannot do a capacity test. I cannot do a capacity test on this battery without those cables. So I ordered one. When I realized that I didn't have them, I ordered them. And right now, they're on their way from Hong Kong Express. Could be in the air, could be in customs. But the shipping company says I'm going to get them on Wednesday. But on Thursday morning, I'm getting on an airplane to go to a real important event for me. And unfortunately, there's no way I'm going to get a capacity test done Wednesday night in the video. There's no way that I can do that. So the capacity test is going to come after I get back. I'm sorry. But with any luck, in a few minutes, we're going to have this thing fired up. So here we are. We're going to put that serrated nut directly on top of the bus bar and hold that down. And the instructions show to do this connection before we connect the BMS wires. I checked that to make sure. 6 Newton meters, click. 6 Newton meters, click. And oh, come here, you. Thank God for magnetic screwdriver bits. And then I'm going to hook up my sensing wire. My wife had such a brilliant idea to tap into this. I can't do that on the lugs on my batteries. There's no space to do that, but here there is. And she sat back and watched and said, hey, why don't you do this? And I thought that was actually such a brilliant idea. She has a lot of good ideas. I'm not going to make that old joke about the blind pig finding an acorn sometimes, because she has lots of good ideas. All right, there we go. What happens if I push the reset button? Do we get a battery? I think we might. Let's try. Oh, look at that. We have fired up. And the instructions that I haven't shown you yet show to peel this little label off and stick on here, put these little yellow buttons on, and let's see what we have. We have, oh goodness, I am so silly. Don't do what I just did. What did I mess up? Oh yeah, my wife, she's pointing at it. That's right. I did not hook up BMS wires up. Holy moly, silly me. All right, the short one goes there. No editing on this channel. When I make a mistake, you get to see it. I looked and the voltage on this battery said something crazy. Oh my goodness, have I caused a problem or not? Let's try it again. Oh, now it's a 53 volt battery. That's a whole lot better than a 5 volt battery. I wonder if I did any problem, if I made any problems with my balancing. Let's just see what the cell voltages are. Wow, they're all very similar, aren't they? Look at that. 3.360 to 3.361, all of them. Well, that's just crazy, isn't it? That is really good results, y'all. I just don't know what to tell you. I'm really happy with this kit. If you want to buy this kit, contact Jenny Wu. JennyWu896@gmail. If you want to support my channel and me, Tell her I sent you. If you want to really support the channel, subscribe. Like the video. If you made it this far, I know you liked it. If you made it this far, you're probably building this kit. Hot damn, I'm excited about that, because if you can't build the big, beautiful wooden boxes, you still need energy independence. Here's your deal. How much does it cost? She tells me that it's about $700 if you're in the US and order it from the Houston warehouse, which that means it includes all the shipping to your door and customs and all that, all included for $700. How much did that wooden box cost me to build? With the BMS. This comes with the BMS, right? Might have been the same. With all the cabling, the plywood, the lacquer, I didn't talk to you about this fuse. This fuse is a 400 amp 80 volt ANL fuse. It is not a T-class fuse. I am not going to try to install a T-class fuse in here. If this battery gets a short, that fuse will blow. And that's pretty much what that fuse is for. I have seen on somebody's YouTube channel when they made a mistake and they shorted across their battery and it blew that fuse and probably saved them some real grief. I think those cells were still okay. I don't know how, because it seems like what's inside those cells is going to blow if the fuse blows, but she seemed to be okay and replace that fuse. I think this fuse is just going to have to be good enough. But when you build these batteries, make sure that always your cabling is protected by proper breakers and fuses that are lower than the carrying capacity of those cables. You do not want the cabling to be your fuse. So this is a 200 amp BMS, and I'm using a 175 amp breaker for the connection from it to my combiner box. And I also have a T-class fuse in mine. You have another a 400 amp ANL fuse in this one. Would I recommend this? Yes. Would I do it slightly different, like I showed you? Yes. Would you be okay if you just followed their instructions? Probably. Is the company going to, I hate people that ask and answer their own questions. Is the company going to make modifications to this box in the future to more fully align with what I think they should be doing? All indications point to that being the case. We will see, and I will do a follow-up video if I find that that's what's happened. But yeah, I can recommend this box. It seems real good, and I am going to put this box into service in my system. As I fire my system up, I'm going to put it into service, and we will do a long-term review video on this in a year or so and let you know how it played out. That's all for this one. It's a long one, y'all. I'm sorry. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope if you need it that you're able to find it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.